Good evening, afternoon, morning, night, whenever you find where to watch or listen to this podcast. It's me, Omar from the Hardware Podcast. I'm back. Sound a little rusty, I guess, at first because it's been a while. It's been a slow off season. Up until May, late May is when things kind of pick up, when you can kind of smell the grass, smell the leather, as the first 3 weeks of TV network TV time selections are noted or are released. And the bowl schedule also gets released in a couple weeks. So it's really been slow, hasn't been much content for me and Jackson, but be on the lookout because we've been able to schedule. And please have patience on Jackson because he's dealing with a fiance and getting married in a few months too. So that's also been I guess a lot of the reason for a lot of the content, and of course as well too, I mean, training and everything. But I'm here with the guest. I guess I'm excited to have a colleague on Redshirtsports.xyz, where we both write at, and he really produces just great pieces on. I mean, we're FCS focused at Redshirt Sports, but just on the Midwest in terms of Division I college football. He had a great piece about Tommy DeVito in a couple, I guess, a few weeks ago with the draft. I mean, time kind of flies. And then had a great piece that we're kind of going to be talking about the biggest news in conference realignment this past week. So I'm joined by Mike Terril of Redshirt Sports. And Mike, if you don't mind giving us a little background and just anything you want to share or promote.
Well, thanks, Omar. I appreciate it. I've started out. I've been writing for off and on probably the last 20 years. I've done some newspaper. I've done some article. I uh, been on some other websites. Done some sideline work. Done a little bit of radio. Um, Done a few podcasts. Not that many. I usually stay behind the scenes. Basically, I've always been known as a contributor. I really haven't wrote a whole lot. I usually help out with stats and just in general, just things that come along. The one thing is, of course, I'm an IU alum, so I'm familiar with the OVC. Plus, I'm 25 minutes away from the University of Illinois, so I'm a big Illini fan, and I've worked a few of their games. And I do have to admit one thing: there is no food spread like the U of I's food spread in the press box. There is some food in that booth. Uh, but they're getting, like you pointed, this news that came out a couple days ago with Western Illinois moving to the OVC out of the Missouri Valley. That's huge for Western Illinois. I spoke with one of the alum and boosters, and I'm not sure, but I think if he could have jumped through the phone and gave me a big hug, he would have. He was really excited about the fact that Western was moving out of the Missouri Valley and getting into a conference where not only the football program can be more competitive, but they can also financially benefit from the Olympic sports and the travel necessary, and hopefully get back get back in the black instead of consistently costing them money just to fund programs. And I think some of their programs will exist a lot longer now that they're in the OVC. Uh, because they've been competitive in baseball, they've been competitive in other sports, and this will give them a chance to really kind of thrive instead of uh, competing in the Summit League, is where their Olympic sports compete, and that costs them that costs them considerably to try to fund their transportation.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd have to agree. I mean, it's just a great point too, just about what you said about the AD, wanting to give a hug over the phone. I never realized how dispersed the Summit League is. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people don't realize it as well, because I feel like the common misconception between casual fans of, well, probably college basketball and college football, is that you see North Dakota State and, well, pretty much every single Dakota school in the MVFC, and you assume that they're in the Missouri Valley Conference in basketball and Olympic sports, but that's just simply not the case. Where the Summit League is where they put their teams. And so Western Illinois, it's a tall task, honestly, traveling not just to the Dakotas, but also all the way down to Denver, and then Oklahoma for Oral Roberts too. So definitely a huge money saver. And the OVC, I mean, it's in a good spot. It's always been in a good spot in Olympic sports. Football has really been the only concern, which we'll address later on. But they've had some really solid additions lately, adding Lindenwood, adding the University of Southern Indiana. I almost said Indianapolis. I know there's been some news with Indianapolis, but University of Southern Indiana, just adding schools that are in their footprint and are ready to go and want a piece of the Division One Olympic sports pie, which honestly, with March Madness and the whole thing with units, which someone still needs to explain how units work to me at this point. It always confuses me every spring. But with the units that you get from the NCAA tournament compared to the Division Two tournament, which I don't think they do units, as only the Final Four is only part of that tournament that's like broadcasted on over the air TV. Just a huge advantage, and the OVC's been taking advantage of that. So I mean, I couldn't agree more with the footprint and competitiveness. I think it's interesting too because it's like the age-old discussion of, would you rather be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond? And this is what we have here. The MVFC is the SEC of the FCS, as we were kind of talking about before, like how there's like a Big Two in FBS when it comes to money, the Big Ten and SEC. There's a Big Two in the FCS when it comes to playoff berths and kind of money as well, I guess, with the CAA and the MVFC. Excuse me. And so Western Illinois has not reached the playoffs since 2017, and they've always kind of struggled in the MVFC from what I can remember. And then now with the OVC, OVC looks wide open, or I should say the Big South OVC looks wide open every single year with Jacksonville State leaving. So they certainly can sneak into the playoffs for sure. In that conference. So I mean, I think it's just a great move all around, cost wise, competitiveness wise, all around. I mean, so I'm excited to see how it turns out for them. I guess one question too, as I mentioned briefly, as we talked about beforehand, with the Big South OVC alignments. Because right now, that alliance is at 10 schools. You have 6 OVC schools and 4 Big South schools. Now the OVC is at 7 schools. So you have 11 teams in the alliance, but the OVC seems pretty stable right now. I don't think any more members are going to be poached in the near future, by particularly the A-Sun. So do you think the Big South OVC alliance is on its way out, or is it here to stay with the after the addition of Western Illinois?
Um, well, I think that's to be seen. Because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Omar, I'm not really sure, but I believe that the alliance between the Big South and the OVC is to 2026. I believe they had, I want to say I'd have to go back through my notes and look it up. Um, but I wanted to say that they had, I believe they had a 4-year agreement.
I'm
Um,
looking at that right now.
I don't believe it was a year for
It
year.
is, yeah. It says at least 4 years. So
Yeah, so see, they're going to be stable. One of the big things is, now this is just me from the outside looking in. I haven't spoke with anybody to confirm anything or get opinions yet, but I'm almost wondering with the geographics of the two conferences and uh, the way that the expenses and things um, are basically driving these schools into the ground. I just kind of wonder if we won't see this consolidation stay longer and possibly even turn into them renaming their conference, the OVC Big South. I don't think you'll ever see them get rid of their names. The Ohio Valley's not going to go away, and the Big South's not going to go away. But I could see them where they can consolidate it, and basically become one big conference. And they would be able to compete as far as their recruiting. That would be huge. And another thing I kind of wanted to add, and Like I said, I've tried to confirm it. And when I talk to anybody over at Indianapolis, I kind of get mum's the word. Don't want to comment right now, but I think it's coming. I really honestly believe that the University of Indianapolis is going to make the step up from D2 to Division One, and I think they're going to really look at the Ohio Valley. And if they make the move into the Ohio Valley, they're going to be like another Lindenwood. They're going to come in and they're going to compete right off the bat, even though they can't compete for championship or for playoffs and championships yet. They're going to come in and they're going to compete because they've been competitive in their D2, and that would be huge. And then I think also, Omar, now you correct me if I'm wrong, but won't this give the Big South a big chance to possibly go out and recruit some schools to join their conference? I mean, the Missouri Valley's at 12 schools now, I
You can check
believe.
that really quick.
And I think what you're going to see is, I think you're going to see that like you're seeing in the in FBS with the SEC and the Big Ten. 14, 16 teams is not going to be that's not going to be a rarity. I think you're going to see conferences, if they can financially do it and absorb these teams. You might see conferences of 16, 18 teams, possibly even a 20 team conference, and have 10 team divisions, which in FCS, it makes more sense really than in the FBS, but if they get regionally centered in the FCS, that's a win-win for everybody as far as their travel expenses and recruiting the areas. The Big South has been faltering for years, but the OVC's been weak, and the OVC is kind of like a heartbeat; it's up and down. And they throw the occasional PVC in there where they kind of go below the bottom line. But with this, like we spoke earlier, this is just basically an even trade between the OVC and the Missouri Valley, with Murray State moving to the Missouri Valley. So Western Illinois, they just jumped up and they saw the light at the end of the tunnel and petitioned, and the OVC approved it and allowed them to slide right on in and fill Murray State's open spot.
Yeah, I would have to agree. But I think for the Big South OVC Alliance, for me, the one thing that has me skeptical of its long-term viability is Robert Morris and Bryant, because you look at those schools, like I don't think asking the schools that are members of the OVC to travel to like Charleston Southern and Gardner Webb, the two Carolina schools and the 14, or I guess out of the four football playing Big South schools, I don't think that's a big ask for the OVC schools. It's traveling all the way to Rhode Island and traveling to Western Pennsylvania. That's kind of the big ass. So like for me, it's like I don't think there's enough juice for the squeeze when it comes to Brian and Robert Morris. And that's not a disrespectful statement to their fan bases. Like both fan bases or programs themselves. Joe, I think it was like Joe Walton, great coach for a number of years for Robert Morris, built that program from the ground up. Absolutely wonderful job. And then Bryant's been close to winning either the Big South or the NEC in the past couple of years, and they almost beat Florida International this past year, and they almost beat Akron the year prior. Like they gave Akron a run for their money. So it's not a disrespect for their programs, but it's like you look at the alumni bases and you look at the kind of the market share that each has. Like you look at Robert Morris, like yes, they're in the Pittsburgh Metro, but they play in a 3,000 seat stadium, and if they have a piece of the Pittsburgh sports market, it's a very small piece too. And I mean, yes, they're close to like Youngstown, the Youngstown market as well. But I mean, that's Youngstown State country, and on a bigger scale, that's Ohio State and MAC country. Going on to Bryant, I don't think they have much of a share in the Boston TV market, which is the closest one in Providence. They're sharing that with Brown, who, I mean, Brown is a I mean, Brown is the biggest brand football wise in that area with, they have at least one guaranteed national TV weeknight game a year with the Ivy League. That's something that almost no other conference can guarantee its members aside from maybe the SWAC and MEAC. And then of course there's Rhode Island too, and the CAA, which is a more competitive conference, which is like we talked about the Big Two. So um, for those reasons, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze in keeping the alliance past 2026. And just making those constant trips to like Rhode Island and Pittsburgh for sure. But I mean, like you said too, like the age of super conferences, it looks like it's here to stay in the FBS, and it may even trickle down to the FCS, even though it's more difficult too, because in those regions you have comparable conferences. Like when it comes to the CAA, you have you have the SoCon, which is pretty strong in itself, which it's a multi-bid conference in most years. It's but it's not a weak conference by any means. And then with the MVFC, I mean, you kind of have you have the OVC, which has been kind of weak, but I mean, it's still, I feel like the footprint is too big to even like poach a lot of those schools as well. And I mean, one school was, I mean, the school that we're talking about is in that footprint, and they've already gone to the OVC as it is. So that's just my take on the whole thing. But I mean, it's just interesting. I mean, for me, I think that's the biggest takeaway is like what happens to this alliance too. I mean, because Brian and Robert Morris are the odd folks out, and I mean, I kind of wonder how bad the blood is between Robert and Brian, or sorry, Brian and Robert Morris, with the NEC, that they couldn't be football only members. I guess I wonder how bad that breakup was. So that's just my takeaway.
Well, I no, I agree with you on as far as Bryant and Robert Morris, and which actually I uh, sorry to both of those schools because I actually forgot about them when I started on my little uh, Christmas list there for the Big South and the OVC joining uh, hands there. That the other, one of the other things too is I read an article the other day, and I don't recall who it was by, but they were talking about Division two schools really looking to take the step up, and I was really surprised. I kind of had the idea that from some of the things that I had read first that these Division two schools were pretty much happy with where they were at, and we weren't going to see a whole lot of moving around. I'm not real sure now. I think we're just the tip of the iceberg with Lindenwood coming into the OVC last year. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. From some of the things that I've heard around. I think there's several schools. You're going to have some Indiana schools. You're going to have some Ohio schools. You're going to have some Kentucky schools. Several Division two schools here in Illinois that I think that they may start looking at that Division one revenue, um, and the scholarship offers and the competitiveness. And I think they may start putting some effort into the research to see if they're going to see if they really want to make that leap. Because that's a long term investment. If you decide to go from a D2 to a D1 school, you're looking, you might as well look at 6 years of where you're just going to kind of exist before you can be competitive. And the other thing is too, you don't want to be a school like here in Illinois, a McKendree or a Quincy or a Eureka, and say, well, hey, look at what Lindenwood did, and jump into the Division one ranks, and then be 0-11, 0-12 every season. So there's a lot of different balancing factors that are involved in it. And I think the more successful D2 programs, I think they're going to really start making a concerted effort to um, join the Division one ranks. And those schools are small enough; they're going to really be looking at FCS. I mean, let's we have to be realistic. They're not going to make a jump into an FBS, but the FCS would be a good fit for them. Um, like I said earlier, with the University of Indianapolis, and that to me is a logical jump for them because they basically have the Indianapolis market. So they're gonna come with, and they have a really good fan base. So they're gonna come with some fire if they decide to make the step up into the FCS. Um,
Oh,
sorry, but I don't really foresee a lot of these teams wanting to go to conferences outside their regional footprint. And I think that's the biggest suitor for even the Missouri Valley. Because I'm almost sure that the Missouri Valley sitting there looking, thinking, you know what, we could get to be that SEC and we could go to 16 teams easily. Um, that's just my opinion, but it just seems like there's economically right now, there's an awful lot of these programs I think are sitting there and thinking that they could get in and they can compete with these FCS schools.
yeah, I agree on the Division II part, and I know along with these OVC rumors, the schools that always get tied in are like Grand Valley State and I think Ferris State as well when it comes to competition, especially Ferris State. Well, I mean Grand Valley State too, because I mean they were a Division II power when I was a kid. I'm not sure about now, but right now Ferris State is who is kind of ruling Division II, especially and I mean especially that conference, the GLIAC. And I just looked at their enrollments. I mean, Wayne State's got I know Wayne State hasn't been too great in football as Ferris State, but Wayne State's got over 22,000 students. Grand Valley State has over 20,000, and Ferris State has over 10,000 students. So you have schools with great enrollments. You have a chance to get into the Detroit market with these schools as well, especially with Wayne State, where you're right in the heart of Detroit. So I think that's where the OVC probably could go next. With your point with the Division II expansion as well. And I mean, the GLIAC it's not really a stable conference at the moment. There's only 7 football playing schools, and there's just a huge discrepancy between enrollments of schools where you have schools like I'm looking at it right now, Lake Superior State University, who has an enrollment of less than 2,000 students, and then you have Wayne State, which is almost 23,000. So I feel like there's always sort of that lack of like-mindedness when it comes to I guess that pushes schools out, and I definitely see the GLIAC having that and potentially making some schools consider going to the FCS ranks or going to the Division I ranks and joining like a conference like the OVC to further stabilize that conference.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree
Yeah.
because
So
the Great Lakes. I'm sorry, I
no,
keep
my bad.
the Great Lakes Conference. That is one of them. That's where a lot of these are going to come out of, I think, because just as you pointed out, their enrollments, they warrant Division I. And if they feel that they can be competitive, right now is the perfect time for them to move because this conference realignment, you know, uh, and ESPN and the other and Fox Sports. I was listening to a couple things the other day about conference realignment, and I completely agree. It's just the beginning. This is just the beginning for them.
Sorry,
In
this
the
is in my
Great Lakes
mom's house for
family,
Mother's Day. Yeah, yeah, this
yeah,
is in my house for Mother's
yeah.
Day for this recording. So but yeah, no, I agree. So I guess going back to the Western Illinois point, in terms of the conference's makeup, we talked beforehand about, I guess when it comes to realignment, a lot of rivalries are killed by realignment. And there is the Western Illinois, Southern Illinois rivalry that takes a back seat for a while, and the Western Illinois, Illinois State rivalry that takes a back seat. But we also get a revival of one rivalry, classic East versus West, West Side Story clash, where we get Eastern Illinois, Western Illinois reuniting once again. They've met over 60 times in their history. Last met in 2016, so will be 7 years since their last meeting. And even before that home and home series, 1997 was their last meeting. So I guess the thoughts on either the loss of rivalries or the reigniting of a rivalry for Western Illinois with this conference realignment move.
Well, this is something that's going to be huge for Western because you're going to have East not, now I've got a dog park, but you're going to have the classic East versus West uh, rivalry matchup, but also the other thing is too, you've got Lindenwood just down the road in St. Louis. So they're also the potential for another rivalry game there. And the travel time that we were speaking earlier, that's one thing about Western Illinois fans is they're extremely passionate about their school and they get excited about their program. And so they're going to travel to both locations. And unfortunately, right now, Eastern, I don't know if they'll travel as well as Western will. So this is a big move for Western. I honestly believe. I think it's going to be great.
So I agree on the travel point, and it's cool to see these new rivalries. So one last thing before we wrap up is I looked at the sort of destinations for a lot of the schools in the MVFC. The Dakota schools, Illinois State. There are not really many major metro areas that really caught my eye in that conference. When you look at the OVC though, when it comes to football, you have Lindenwood in the St. Louis area, you have Tennessee State in the Nashville area. And those are the first two that came to mind. So I guess what do you think about just factoring in how well Western Illinois fans travel? Do you think it's a win getting to travel to these destinations as well as the occasional trip to Robert Morris, the Pittsburgh Metro, and the occasional trip to Charleston Southern, like North Charleston, South Carolina. So overall, is that aspect also a win for Western Illinois fans?
Oh, I think by far, I think it is. I think the other thing too is it's going to open up the recruiting market for Meyerson, and I can see them being able to really get a recruiting footprint into the St. Louis area because Eastern Illinois recruits a lot in the Chicago area in suburbs up there. They're going to come out of Central Illinois, out of Macomb, and they're going to be able to just slide down the road to St. Louis and recruit St. Louis. They're not going to get the 4 and 5 star athletes out of St. Louis, and they're going to have some competition with Lindenwood. But they're any major market like this, they're going to be able to get a recruiting footprint in and put somebody in those locations to recruit. So yes, that those markets are going to be absolutely huge. Plus, they're going to get into the Nashville market, which that's going to help them. That's going to be huge as well. Um, one other thing that I kind of wanted to point out. I've spoken to several coaches in the OVC, and one of the biggest problems that they have said is nobody promotes the OVC anymore. The promotion is lackluster at best. I know that there are fans that don't even know the OVC exists. Outside of UT Martin and SEMO, who do you ever hear about in playoffs in the last 3 or 4 years? The last 3 years, UT Martin and SEMO are the only ones that have even really got any attention. So with this move, I'm hoping that and the Big South Alliance, I'm kind of hoping that maybe they can get some competitiveness and get a good enough team into the playoffs to make some noise, kind of like SEMO did last year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said, there's like a lot of up and coming from like Simo had a great year last year. I mean, Gardner Webb in their first playoff appearance had a strong showing in the playoffs this past year. So definitely a bright future. Just a lot to sort out in this changing landscape of college football. That's been a little bit more complicated this past week with Western Illinois moving to the Ohio Valley Conference. But that's all the points that I had for this discussion. Mike, do you have anything else to add or promote?
Not nothing right now. I guess I think we pretty much touched on it, and I've ran my mouth about as much as I can run my mouth today. Um, I guess the biggest thing that I do, I kind of want to say is, watch the OVC. There's good competition in the OVC. Great coaches, some of the best coaches. And I hope he sees this. But Chris Wilkerson down at EIU is doing a wonderful job. He's brought in a great coaching staff. I guess one other thing, Omar, that I should say that we haven't really spoken about. We really haven't talked about the actual program at Western and what's going on. Because they've only won 4 games in the last 4 years. They hired a first time coach in Myers Hendrickson. They've got him in at Western. Of course, his father coached at Western. Myers grew up in Macomb, played high school football at Macomb, very successful out in Kansas as a D3 coach, brought him in. I think there's good things at Western. I think they're going to develop a decent program. That's why I think this is huge for them as far as recruiting. He's brought in some great coaches. Lindenwood, look out. Lindenwood's going to be a force to be reckoned with out of St. Louis. SEMO, another thing, I got to do one more promotion there, but you got to remember SEMO has got one of the best running backs in the nation, Geno Hess. I think everybody needs to kind of take notice and watch Geno Hess, see where he goes. I think he's going to be drafted. I think he's going to be a NFL product next year. If not, he's going to go to the XFL. I think that's kind of where the guys that are coming out there wanting to go to the XFL because you got the Rock, so they like that. Another thing is Jason Simpson down at UT Martin. I kind of feel like a commercial here, but I just kind of want to give some shout outs to some of these coaches because I don't think they get promoted and talked about enough. But Jason Simpson, he's done a great job down at UT Martin. Just had one of his guys was the only OVC player in the NFL draft, went in the 7th round. Dresser Wynn, his quarterback, signed a unrestricted free agent with the Chargers. So there's some moving around and there's some things going on, and there is some really good talent coming out of the OVC. So I hope everybody can kind of sit back and get ESPN Plus and check out some of the OVC competition because it really is. It's worthwhile to watch them.
I agree with you for sure. I mean, ESPN Plus, it's a great deal. I know I'm paying for the bundle for my family with the Disney Plus and a Hulu. I don't really use Disney Plus. I use the Hulu also because Family Matters is on Hulu. So big fan of Family Matters. But also too, I mean, I can't believe you forgot to mention the Notre Dame game with Tennessee State, which is probably the biggest game in years in terms of exposure for the OVC. You get a national TV audience on NBC, and of course that game's going to serve as the lead-in for Penn State, West Virginia, the big debut of Big Saturday Night. Because we're all fans of branding when it comes to broadcast. Big Saturday Night on NBC. So, just a great time for the OVC. I mean, they were left for dead, and now they're back with on an upward trajectory, and it's just great to see.
Oh, exactly. And I appreciate you bringing me on here to kind of promote them a little bit. And I can't believe I left Eddie George and Notre Dame out of that. I'm glad you corrected me and pointed that out because that's going to be huge for the OVC. So I appreciate being on here, Omar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And this won't be the last time that we keep in touch and you'll be on this podcast. I really enjoy your insight because, truthfully, I mean, with everything happening in college football, one division is too much for one or two people to cover alone. So you got to have, like you say, contributors and just people that are just love the conferences they cover. So I'm grateful to have you on, and thank you for your insights.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, until next time, everyone, recording this on Mother's Day. So go spend time with your mothers. Just have a great time. Be grateful for them. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.